Imagine what it would feel like in your busy, productive, ambitious life if you could actually go through your days feeling like you had all the time in the world. If that sounds impossible, you're going to love my interview with my guest, Laura Vanderkam, who wrote the book Off the Clock. She is a time management and productivity expert who's written several books about how smart people who feel like they have all the time in the world are actually some of the most ambitious, successful, busy people in the world. Tune in and hear some tips and strategies for how to look at your day, how to approach your time, and how to live a better, more enriched life. Hi everyone, it's Maria here again with another expert slice of brilliance for you. I am thrilled to talk to you today about time management, or more accurately, as it relates to the book we're going to talk about today, time nourishment. I am beyond thrilled to talk to Laura Vanderkam, the author of Off the Clock. Hello, Laura. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you guys are really going to love what we're going to talk about today in terms of not your typical time management strategies. This is not going to be an interview about productivity hacks, which you all know is my least favorite word, but really about how to just nourish the time you have on this earth and make it count and fit in all the things that you want to fit in that are important to you and that will help move your business forward. Just a little bit about Laura. She is amazing. She is the author of several time management and productivity books, including the new Off the Clock, Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. She's the co-host with Sarah Hart Unger of the podcast Best of Both Worlds, and she lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and 4 children and blogs at lauravanderkam.com. Hello, Laura. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I just want to dive right in, and before I do, I just want to tell folks that I finished reading the book Off the Clock, and I will have links to that below the video for everybody. But it was really an amazing book. It prompted so many epiphanies for me, just so many ways to look at my time and how I'm spending it, and not so much like, what are the 10 things I need to do to get more done in a day, but just a very philosophical approach to how we're living our lives and how we're filling our time. Was that your intent with this book? And as you talk about that, what do you mean by off the clock?
Yeah, well, I've written a lot about time management strategies in the past, and I'm always up for a good hack. It is awesome to find some way to save time. But I mean, it's really, broader than that. This book is about how people perceive time and how somebody can, in the midst of a full life, still feel relaxed about time, feel like time is abundant, like they do have the time for the things that are important to them. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in that from the philosophical angle of it. I also like data. You
do lots of data.
lots of data. So I did a time diary project. I had 900 people with full-time jobs and with families track their time for a day. And then I asked them questions about how they felt about their time. So questions designed to get at a sense of time abundance or time scarcity. So I could then compare the schedules of the people who felt time was abundant with sort of equally busy people who felt time was scarce, and see what the differences were and why some people feel off the clock and some people just don't. So yeah, that's where
it's sort of the how do they do it, right? We all know those people.
Yeah. Well, if you think about the phrase off the clock, I mean, this came to me. I had a moment where I realized like I had no immediate obligations. I was off in Maine. I was out running for the morning, and I'm like, oh, well, what do I have to do next? I'm like, I don't have to do anything next, which is, not a moment that really occurs that often in my life. I said, oh, I feel off the clock. This little word, this phrase popped into my brain, similar to punching out at your restaurant jobs or whatever people have. And, I realized, well, that sense of time freedom is so alluring and elusive. And so I wanted to write about it. And as I did, I realized there's a lot of paradoxes about this because, it seems like being off the clock means having no obligations, but the reality is that certain obligations make us feel like we have more time. It seems like feeling off the clock would be like not thinking about plans and things like that. But in fact, sometimes doing really good things with planning is what allows us to feel off the clock. So explore a lot of those topics.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the book is so super useful is is in a lot of these dichotomies and these paradoxes, which we're going to talk about today. And one of the things to what you said about this perception there, my life is very full, very crazy busy, but, often people look at me sometimes as that person of like, how do you do it all? And I'm always amazed that they look at me like that. Cause I'm like, you don't see what goes on behind the scenes and like, the moments. But one of the things that has been helpful for me when I'm mindful of remembering it is a year or so ago, a friend of mine gave me this perspective that was kind of life-changing, which was you're going to have as much time as the script in your head tells you. So if you're constantly going around saying, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough time, oh my God, I'm so busy, I don't have enough time, that's going to be your reality. But she said, if you just keep telling yourself, I have all the time I need, I have all the time I need. And I thought at the time, like, that's really woo-woo, like that's nice, except when I have to go take my son to do this thing and deliver a client proposal and, something breaks in the house and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually true. I've actually changed that script in my head to really be about, I have enough time. I have enough time. And not only does it physically calm me down, but it also enables me then to look at what my calendar is or my schedule is for that day or week through a different lens. Through like, oh, I can fit it all in. How am I going to fit it all in?
Yeah.
Rather than I can't possibly fit it all in.
Much better question. How am I going to fit it in as opposed
right.
to who could fit it in?
Right.
Nobody could. Yeah, that's not really helpful. No, I like the phrase, I have all the time in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
It's true. We do
Yep.
have all the time in the world. And it does calm you down. It does, rushing just makes you feel rushed. There are very few things that are improved by rushing to do them. It's not going to change the situation. It's just going to make you mad.
Right.
I was repeating that to myself on the drive home from the airport today. I was just like, Friday afternoon traffic. Like, why? Why are these people like on the road at 2:45 in the afternoon? Like, what?
So they have jobs? What's going on?
What's going on? And then it's just like, well, it's going to take the amount of time it takes to get home. Like, that's the reality. And like, I don't have a helicopter in my backyard, so this is what it's going to be. So,
right.
Just try to relax.
I love it. I love it. So on a macro level, this is a quote that you had in the book, and it actually wasn't near the beginning, but I just wanted to kick off our conversation with this is, what do you think the issue is? I mean, are we really busier than other generations, or is it perception? I know my dad thinks we are, when my dad's 89 and he's like, oh my gosh, you guys are doing so much. But one of the quotes you had in the book was, the reason modern types feel so busy and yet have such trouble getting things done is that we let ourselves become dependent on constant stimuli. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're actually busier than people were in the past. I mean, if you do, you think you should be like running a farm, like where you're making all your own food and raising 10 children and chopping all your wood by hand. Like you got a lot going on when you got that going on. So most of us are surprisingly cushy compared to that. But I think what it is, the reason we feel busy, I mean, I found is I had people track their time and ask them questions about their time, that people who check their phones, the people who felt most relaxed about their time check their phones about half as frequently as the people who felt most stressed and starved for time. And what tends to happen is that looking at your phone, you have leisure time, but you are chopping it up. And the phone feels like work because your email is on there, people could call you for work, but most of the time it's actually not. Like, you might have like deleted 3 emails and then you're over at Facebook. Like, let's be honest here about what's going on.
Yeah.
But in your mind, it's like, oh, I'm working all the time. Like, look at me.
Working.
I'm working. I deleted 3 emails before I went out, which, didn't deleted. So we have leisure time and we chop it up into these smaller chunks, and then we feel like we don't have it. It feels like it doesn't exist. And the reason is that we're bored. Like, honestly, you're bored. That's why you pick up the phone. When people don't have their access to their phones, they're just sort of like twitchy about it. But it's not because anything necessarily has to be done. It is that you are bored. Now the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? I mean, there's lots of other things you can do about being bored. I mean, you can read a book, you can write something, you could think so, you go for a walk, you can, look at whatever it is you're looking at instead of your phone. There's lots of ways to entertain ourselves.
You can actually be with the people that you're with.
Be with the people you're with. I mean, smile at the person in the coffee shop line. Who knows what would happen if you did that? But it's all these things are ways that people could entertain themselves. It's just now we have something that is so easy to entertain ourselves that we tend to do the phone instead of these other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the big themes in the book was this idea of getting this freedom around your time, but the paradox of that the most effective people that do that are the ones that plan for it. And we often have a struggle with reconciling freedom with planning. And one of the quotes you had in here, which I love, it's a little long, but it's just so great. Being off the clock implies time freedom, yet time freedom stems from time discipline. You must know where the time goes in order to transcend the ceaseless ticking. Freedom does not mean having zero obligations, but it's helpful to see that freedom is multifaceted. It must be viewed from a broader vantage point to be understood. There is freedom from things we don't want to do, but there is also freedom to do the things we want to do. And figuring out the right balance requires understanding when commitments are burdens and when they are benefits. So how do you reconcile this idea of, to feel more free, you actually have to be a better planner?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because sometimes we're like, oh, I don't want to make plans. Like, plans make me feel constrained. The thing, make sure you're making plans for the right things. I do believe in having lots of open space in your life. And a good way to think about it when you're thinking of taking on stuff in the future, try to make it real to yourself and be like, would I be willing to do this tomorrow? Because we are fully aware of what tomorrow us feels like, right? Like, what you could do with your time tomorrow, how you feel about tomorrow. So that makes it more real, whether you really want to do something or not. People ask you to do stuff that's going to take place in like November. That may as well be a completely different person. Like, we're not even on that. Like, that's, right. November me won't have anything on the calendar. Like, I don't need to worry about what my, the opportunity cost in November. Right. But tomorrow we're clear on that one. So, basically if stuff's a 9 or a 10 on the, 1 to 10 scale, sure, go do it, commit to it. Like, it's gonna be awesome. The 5 and 6, that's the problem. When we get too many 5 and 6, then we get overwhelmed and we don't have space to take on the 9 or 10 because we're feeling, I'm too busy, I don't have time, all that stuff. But yeah, just think about it. Like, some of the most absolutely pleasant off the clock feeling time people have is when they are hanging out with friends, right? Like the friends who energize them. Now you think about like going to a dinner party and like you're spending the whole evening with your friends, like that takes a lot of work, right? Like, if somebody's planning the dinner party, somebody's like, you're arranging for a certain time. Like if you're, you
have to get a sitter.
You got to get the sitter. If you've got slightly older kids, maybe it's that they're all in the basement watching a movie, but you got to make sure they're down there doing that. Or, one of the older kids is running.
They have the food, they have the activity.
And their stuff. Like, you're going to have an awesome time. Like, you're going to sit there with your friends, just enjoy it. You're not going to look at your watch for hours. Like, it's going to be great. Right. But that took the effort to plan.
Right.
And so that's the difficult. We have to get over this hurdle of, we don't want our fun to take effort. But the problem is when we don't put effort into our fun, then we only do effortless fun. And in the long run, the effortless fun is the stuff that isn't very memorable or actually all that enjoyable. Like, I mean, I like to look at Instagram, but like after the first 2 minutes, like there's nothing else getting from looking at it. So it's time to get off.
Yeah. It's not feeding my soul right now.
Not feeding my soul.
So, I mean, and that's just a really important thing. And I think it's something intellectually a lot of people know, like, it's something that I've strived to do in the last few years was really turn every task I have or every desired task, even if it's not a work-related task, into an event on my calendar, rather than keeping my calendar here and my list of things I want to do here. Like, the list of things you want to do always takes time. So therefore it should be on my calendar, including when I work out. I haven't gotten to the point where I've actually scheduled like my lunch breaks and all that kind of stuff, but I do know they're there. I'm planning meetings around that time, even though it's not in my calendar. And so for me, it's been very helpful to put things in my calendar. That said, I'm in the midst of writing my next book, and I will tell you that has been a struggle the last year because the time I have blocked has gotten eaten up by other things. The contractor came earlier than expected. My son needed to be picked up from school. A client needed to have the meeting that day. So but at least you're starting from a place where you're making the time in your schedule to do those things. And that includes the fun stuff, like you said, like putting those dinner parties and those like get together with Stacy, TBD, what we're going to be doing. But here's that block of time that I have devoted to her in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So is that what you found with your folks that felt what was the term you used? Time abundant?
Yeah, people had a high time perception score
Right.
in this comparison, because I love how the way you put it, that the things you want to do will take time. So given that your calendar is about time and you're allocating your time, like, if it's not going to be on your calendar, it's not happening. And, maybe you're the sort of person who has all sorts of other time that's not on your calendar. I don't know. Probably not, but maybe you do. But even so, I mean, it helps to have a time in mind when something is going to happen.
Right. And plan to it.
Because, it could work if you're like, if you have no if you have very limited responsibilities in your job, you have no family, like nobody cares what you're doing, like then fine. Like you can make it up as you go, and maybe you'll be like, oh, I feel like going for a long bike ride today, so let me do that.
Which was great when I was single. Which is, like, that worked for me then.
Okay, yeah, you're 21 years old, you can do it, right? Like, but for most people, if you do have a lot of job responsibilities, community responsibilities, family responsibilities, it's harder to carve out that time. And so it needs to be spoken for if you're going to do it.
Yes. And held as sacred, and
as you said, stuff does come up. One of the things I always tell people to do is to try, think through your priorities for the week ahead. Plan your weeks on Friday afternoons. Think through your 3 categories for your to-do list or your priority list: career, relationship, self. And the reason for the 3 categories is because then you put something in all 3 categories. Like, make a 3-category list and then leave one of the categories blank. That's just like not how people do lists. And so you're going to put something in all 3, and that you're like, wow, now I have priorities in all 3 categories. And then you look roughly where they can go in the week. And sort of the real pro tip is to front load the week. And maybe this is something you might think about with the book, because like Monday morning, all the emergencies of the week have yet to arise. And if one does happen to arise, then you've got other time in the week where it could still go. Whereas if you're planning on like sort of later in the week for all these things, well, stuff will come up earlier in the week that you hadn't planned on. And then the stuff that you did need to do will get shoved to the time that you had put for, this
something else. Right.
Yeah. So the further you do it toward the beginning of the week, the better.
Yeah, that's actually something I posted on one of my Facebook groups yesterday, because it was one of those aha moments from reading your book, was this idea of paying yourself first. And if you work best in the morning, if you know that earlier in the week is going to be less interrupted than later in the week, then that's when you should slot in that time. And so actually that I was really excited, because it was yesterday that my writing time was actually my writing time. And it was because instead of doing it in the block where I'd had it, I moved it to the morning, and I didn't even check my email before I started working on the book. I know, right? I mean, and there wasn't this avalanche of crap that was in my email when I got there. Like, it's, you have these like worst case scenarios in your head of like, the sky will fall if I don't check email first thing in the morning. And the reality is not usually that. So I had, and the funny part was I got thwarted in that effort, because I went to a coffee shop and I couldn't connect to their Wi-Fi, and I couldn't get access to my manuscript. So I was like, that's okay. I'm going to be resilient. I still have as long as I give my hour, which was another great goal of your, another great point you made in the book about these good enough goals, like better than nothing goals. Spending 10 minutes on my book was better than spending no time on my book yesterday, or whatever time amount I had. So it was just really helpful for me that you had framed it that way, about paying yourself first and putting these things in time slots where it can work best for you. Rather than some like, I'm going to spend all of Thursday, the entire day, I will not get on email, I will not be bothered by anything, which is why I was so delayed the last year on working on my book.
Yeah, if you wait for a perfect day, you're going to be waiting a while.
Never going to happen. Exactly. So in the book, you talk about, which I loved this part especially, where you talked about memory and reminiscence, as well as savoring anticipation as the keys to making time move more slowly. So you specifically call out this idea that we have remembering selves and we have anticipating selves. And as someone who is I have memories from very early in my life, and I'm a very nostalgic person. I'm the one that spends time leafing through the photo albums or whatever. This part of your book really resonated with me. You wrote a passage that said, creating more memories and hence creating more time requires privileging the anticipating and the remembering selves above the experiencing self in ways that require serious self-discipline. So this is almost counter to what's out there a lot about staying present and being mindful and enjoy the moment. And so I don't think that you're contradicting that. So can you explain that whole idea of savoring memories and why it helps us to stretch time?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, being in the moment is fine, but one of the ways we can stretch out our enjoyment of the moment is to think about it beforehand, anticipate our pleasure beforehand, and to remember and recount our pleasure afterwards. And in fact, there's interesting findings that, people have far rosier memories of activities than they actually experienced in the reality. I found this one study I didn't use in the book, but I wrote about later that these researchers asked people who went on this long bike trip across California, like to rate their adventure. And beforehand, they're all excited, like, oh, I'm going on this bike trip. Afterwards, they're like, that was amazing. In the middle, they're like, my butt hurts. I'm on the seat. So, that's the reality is like, you can't be blissful in the present moment. So it's fine to be in the moment, but we have to understand from the human brain and the human experience, like we're living the present in our temporal bodies, and we can't be 100% blissful. But that doesn't matter because we've got the bliss beforehand, we got the bliss afterwards, and those are going to count for a lot of that unhappiness in the moment. If we understand that that's all part of it, that can make you feel a lot better about, being annoyed that you're getting bitten by a mosquito while you're on this gorgeous beach watching the sunset, with your fruity drink in hand,
Well, and it's so true because, just like people look back at old boyfriends or girlfriends and go, oh, the relationship wasn't so bad. It's like, okay.
It probably was.
Yeah. But yeah, that idea of and I know a lot of people I know feel the same way, that it's often the anticipation of a trip is sometimes even better than the reality of it. It's the savor, the leading up to it, the deciding where we're going to go, the possibilities of it. But then also what I thought was so profound about what you wrote was this idea that if you can live in the moment with a perspective of creating a present that you will want to look back at fondly later is so important. Like you're creating that memory in the moment. So how can you make the most of it in the moment? So when you look back at it, it's going to be meaningful and beautiful to look back at and feel like you spent your time well.
You want to create a real memory. And partly that is about taking in everything you can, thinking about how you will describe it. Sort of, that's what we mean by being in the moment, by like taking in all you can and really experiencing it. Trying not to think about so much other things during it so that you can recount it afterwards, knowing that that's going to be a big part of the pleasure for it. That part about, the issue is because our experiencing selves do feel our, temporal bodies and our lack of energy and all this stuff, it becomes very easy to make decisions based only on how we are feeling now, and
tired to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm too tired to go. Like, oh yeah, I was going to go do X. Like I was going to go have a fun, I've been anticipating this, but I'm tired. Like, I just got home from work, I don't want to do anything, just watch TV. Like, I can go some other time. But then you never make memories. And so this time sort of disappears and it becomes as nothing because you are listening to the experiencing self. So try to, even if we are experiencing now in our bodies, we have to say, well, if I did look forward to this, probably I will enjoy it once I get started. And I will also be happy afterwards that I did it. I will look back on it fondly. So try to remember that this is a 3-actor play and not a monologue, and you should be better off.
Well, and I usually feel that way about my workouts. I never regret going once I've gone. Sometimes I might not want to go, but, and I think it's the same of anything we do in our work is having that approach of like, just do it, just get it done. You'll look at what's going to happen on the other side after you do that task or you do that activity. I I love throughout the book, you really focus on getting people out of a victim mentality of that, like time is happening to them and they have no control over it, which it can feel like that sometimes. I mean, to us as moms, you have 4 kids, like, but there was a story you cited in the book that was so powerful for me, which was the story about the woman who had the triplets, I think.
Yes.
One of them was like special needs or something. And she still, when she did her time diary, she actually found that she had like 2 hours of personal time for herself every day. And it's like, if she can do it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, she had to be very mindful about it. But the thing is, yeah, people had been telling her, when she became spontaneously pregnant with triplets, like no fertility treatments, whatever, this just, life happens sometimes, that she, would never have time for herself again. Like life was over. This was going to be, crazy for years. And it was so like,
the script, right? The script.
Yeah, the script. And so she's like, well, is this true? Well, let me find out. And, yes, the first year is tough, but even in the first year, there was starting to be, some available space. She was sleeping some, not as much as she wanted, but she was sleeping some. And as they got older, and not that much older, we're talking like 18 months here, right? Like she was, having about 3 hours of, leisure time per day. And that is, think about how many people claim they have 0 time whatsoever. And here's this woman with 18-month-old triplets who's like, yeah, I got 3 hours of free time a day. I've tracked my time. I've seen it, And so,
I think that's why the numbers don't lie. Like if you do track the time, it's sort of, you have in your mind, where does the time go? I don't have time. Because again, that's the script you're telling yourself. And then you look at it in black and white and you go, oh, yeah, I actually did have
That's why I think everyone should track their time. I mean, some people don't want to know, right? Like they don't want to know how much time it's.
I know. Ignorance is bliss.
We can cling to our stories because often our stories are sources of identity. And if you have this identity that, oh, I'm the hardworking entrepreneur and never takes
so busy. Yeah.
I'm so busy. Or, I give everything to my family. I have no time to myself. Like sometimes these stories are sources of identity. And so we really don't want to see them questioned. And people feel attacked if they're being questioned. I mean, when I've publicized studies about people's leisure time. I've, written about studies finding, women in particular have leisure time. People are always like, you don't understand. I have none whatsoever. It's like, well, I'm glad that you took some of your limited time to write me about this, but
exactly.
I feel flattered. Really. But yeah, track your time, and because you can see where it goes. You can see if the stories you're telling yourself are true, and if they are, great, that's good. You know where your time is going. So now you can make good choices based on that. But if there are stories that maybe aren't true, then you can decide that, oh, well, maybe it's something different that I want to change, or something else I'd like to add into this time, or I do have leisure time, but I'm not spending it in good ways. And here's something that would be more meaningful to me. Or I have leisure time, but it's at a time when I have no energy. So could I shift my schedule around a little bit so I have more, so I could do something more? Yeah.
Right. Well, and what I was so cognizant of throughout reading the book was you kept talking about 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week. You even at some points cited how many hours we have left, and given the average lifespan. And it's just being very cognizant of the fact that on average, we're all sort of given the same amount of hours, and to think about more mindfully how you're spending each of those hours. And if it's nourishing to you to spend an hour doing absolutely nothing, then that is a good use of one of the hours that you're spending. If that's really where you want to spend your time, to just sit and have a coffee, and which I'm a huge proponent of, is you have to have that recharge time. And that's just as important as your productive time, productive time.
But I would point out that hour with the coffee is got to be consciously chosen, because otherwise you're going to be doing this. Okay. This is what you will be doing with your hour. And then it won't feel like leisure time.
Yeah. And that's why I never look at my phone when I'm in a coffee shop.
There you go.
I put it aside. I never do. I never do when I'm with my son. I mean, not never, but I mean, I consciously don't.
There's some saint over here.
No, I'm not. Seriously. Cause he's done the put your phone down. But I mean, if I'm taking him out for a coffee, I don't have the phone on the table, and that's conscious choice. That's not, I might really, really want to check my email, or really, really want to check what's going on Instagram, but it's making that choice to stay focused, I think, is what, going back to this point that you make throughout the book about sort of losing that victim mentality. You had a quote in here, which I love, which is, it's easy to believe our own excuses, particularly for their good ones. But in a world of 7 billion people, there is always someone facing Y who is doing X. All of us have to assess the plot of life we are allotted every 24 hours and figure out how we can make the most of what we've been given. Like, that's just like, oh, it's on me, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, there's lots of reasons. They may be good reasons, but, you know, on some level, you can decide what to do about that. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I want to get to, maybe it's not so much work related, but you could kind of apply it to the work that you do if you take a certain joy in making memories around the tasks you have to do for work, like going to a networking event or something like that. You talk about balancing this idea of planning and routine with memory making. So people often think, you know, those two are you know, you can't make memories if it's planned, kind of thing, right? But what I love is your ability to point out that you can take these everyday moments and make them memorable. You can take these everyday tasks and make them memorable. You have to make dinner every night. So how can you make that memorable for you and your spouse, or you and your family, or for you alone? You know, how can you make that a joyful experience? So one of the quotes you had was, it is for a different balance between the normal and the novel that people might naturally create. I believe that even normal days can be made special, can be made memorable with a mindset toward adventure. I believe that consciously choosing to create such memories will stretch the experience of time. Can you speak to that?
Well, because, I mean, well, the thing is, when people say, like, where did the time go? What they're really saying is, I don't remember where the time went.
Right. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. I don't know what I did yesterday. Like, yeah.
I quote somebody in there saying that, I don't remember where the time went. And that is because when the time isn't memorable. And if there's no memories of it, then it's gone. It's slipped through the hourglass one side to the other. And I quote some researchers talking about, actually, you know, how our brain perceives time is the more memory units there are of any given length of time, the bigger it seems. So for many people, like high school, the 4 years of high school seem a lot longer than, say, the last 4 years of your own personal life as an adult. And that's because there were more novel experiences. There may be first jobs, first kisses, you know, all these things are firsts in that period of time. And so we have more memories of that. Now, obviously, as an adult, you can't have, you know, all new stuff all the time.
Right.
And
there's life-changing events all the time.
There's not life-changing events every day. And also because, you know, it's, there are good things about routines. That's also what helps us do things like get to the gym, or, you know, get our grocery shopping done. If we know we always do it Monday after work, or, you know, then it happens, and so we don't have to think about it. That's great. But if every day is the same, then that's how whole years disappear into these memory sinkholes. So figure out, you know, how could you answer the question of why is today different from other days, right? So it's a version of the Passover question, which why is tonight different from all other nights? So why is today different from other days? And if you can answer that, then you have a higher chance of this day actually, you know, staying in your memory. So, you know, I'm thinking about, like, you know, I've been traveling this week. I've been pondering, like, what were differences about different days? Not all of them have it. But certainly, you know, like Wednesday, I remember seeing a rainbow out of the plane window. That was kind of cool. Like, I'm going to remember that. Like, you don't see that very often. That was really cool. Turned out the rainbow was because there's, like, massive storm systems. Say Thursday we had, oh my goodness.
You're like, this is beautiful. And people below are like, we're in chaos.
Yeah. And Thursday when I was in Missouri, we had a horrible storm system come through. It's actually been in the news. And there were tornado sirens going off while I was there. We had to go seek shelter somewhere. I mean, like, so that's a memorable day, you know?
Yeah, that's not the ordinary.
That's not the ordinary. I was like, well, that's probably something I'm going to remember, right? But, you know, that's naturally memorable. The rainbow itself is something that I need to try to remember, right? But that's something I can think of as having been an interesting thing. Or thinking back to, like, last Sunday, we decided to take a day trip to go to Cape May. And, you know, we were all kind of tired. It would have been easy not to do that, but we decided to drive to the beach, you know, about an hour, 45 minutes. And, you know, there were some hassles, but we have the memories of that day now. It's not going to be completely disappeared. I remember seeing dolphins, for instance, and that was really cool to see the dolphins leaping around in the water.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important I think that's where your reflection, that this whole idea of, like, looking back on the memories comes into play, because if you can hold on to that, and then after your plane ride, look back and remember I saw that rainbow out the window, you know, it locks it into your memory a little bit more, because you're revisiting it over and over. You know what I mean? When I read that part of your book, it made me think of this funny story. I studied abroad in college, and there was a group of like 19 of us in the Netherlands, and we were staying in these dorms, over there. And there was a gal on the trip who every day would play that summer, the song by UB40 was really popular. They did a remake of Can't Help Falling in Love with You.
Yeah, yes.
So she played it every day, and it was driving us crazy. And she would, like, every time she was with us, and we were like, why are you playing that? She goes, because for the rest of your lives, when you hear this song, I want you to think about the summer. And I do every time. I completely lost touch with this woman. I have no idea where she is, but like it worked.
Yeah.
So
you can consciously create artifacts like that, right? That's why couples like to have their song, right? It like conjures up the beginnings of their relationships. Or you can do a scent, right? Like you could try doing this if you're going somewhere amazing. Like start sniffing the hotel soap like every day, right? And then that scent is going to be your reminder of the trip. Like you're going to keep remembering it. Or maybe it's a certain dish that you have every time at a restaurant. You're not going to be able to recreate that, but when you say something like that, you see that again, or a wine you enjoyed on a trip, you have that again, it's going to conjure this up. Smells are very good for this. I talk about, some ridiculous like honeysuckle perfume I found in high school. And like, now it brings me back. I'm 17. Like every time I sniff that stupid smell, so it's, that she was onto something. She created an artifact. She was proactively creating an artifact for you.
She was. And it's just funny. I wish I could run into her again and be like, thank you for that. So the last question I have for you is this idea of, and again, we talked about it a little bit more, about planning ahead so that you can feel more freedom. And we all know that actually planning does make you feel like you have a more of a sense of calm, a sense of ease, because you're not scrambling, right? But this idea of planning to make space, we alluded to it earlier, of like planning that hour where you're just sitting with your coffee on your deck and not doing anything. You had a great quote where you said, people who are good stewards of time are careful not to fill precious hours with what doesn't feel like the best use of those precious hours. They know that what looks like nothing can be a better choice than something. They know that open space invites opportunity in a way a cluttered calendar can't. These moments of nothing, chosen because time is precious, also have the paradoxical result of making time feel plentiful. Yeah. So in a busy life, in your world of having 4 kids and a thriving career and a spouse and friends and family outside of your immediate family, as well as things you want to do for yourself, what's your approach to creating that open space? And what do you feel like it does for you to have that open space?
Well, I do like to have open space. I don't like to have too much crammed in, because then I get tired and I get cranky and and I don't mind having quick transitions between things. I mean, sometimes, especially if I know it's coming up, that's what makes life possible. And that's just the reality of it. However, so I love to create like open days in my calendar, and I have one of these little paper calendars. So it really truly is like an open day. Like I'm looking at it, I'm like, ooh, look at that. And then it was open but when I see it's open, I try to keep it open, right? Like I'll choose other days to put stuff on. So if somebody suggests talking that day, I'm like, no, that day's not going to work for me. Right. Yeah, it's not going to work. Can we do and then suggest another time? And it's because I like to have the open days. I tend to use them to write. I love to use them to write or to edit something that I really want to get into, because I love to have like an open block of 8 hours to work on a project I'm really getting into. That's when I feel like, I am in the zone. Like the only reason I'm looking at the time is because why am I hungry all of a sudden? Oh, it's lunchtime. Who knew? And so, I like to have that open space, or it's nice to like sit out on the back porch and read, for instance, on the weekend. If I know like the older kids will go do whatever, but the little one, needs more supervision. But if he and my husband are out like grocery shopping together and I know they're gone for like 90 minutes, I'll be like, now I'm just going to sit on the back porch and like read and have this open space and try to enjoy it. I really like, time that is not spoken for, but you have to plan the open space, because otherwise it gets filled with something. I mean, there's expectations are infinite. Like the demands are infinite of things you could do, and time is finite. So you're always choosing, and that includes choosing open space. So sometimes I think we choose well by choosing to have open space.
So I'm going to ask you a really like frank question. Okay. And you write about time management and this approach. What percentage of the time do you feel like you're successful at doing this?
I guess it depends. I mean, I try to take my own advice.
It's not 100%, right?
It's not 100%.
For anyone.
Yeah, and it's not for anyone. And I certainly waste time. I mean, I talk about my speeches, like people don't want to track their time because they don't want to see how much time they're wasting. And say, let's get this out of the way right now. I waste time. You waste time. We all waste time, right? Like it's not about that. I definitely will spend more time screwing around online, doing, reading some long conversation, which is funny, but like is not doing anything for me. I've got a bit of a magazine reading habit that I'll look through like gossip magazines, and I don't need to know about these people. Like, why am I doing this? I don't know. I should be reading a book instead, or even just, staring at the clouds might be more enjoyable than reading about the latest escapades of, whatever person that I don't actually know. I don't even watch their show either. So like, why am I?
Why do I know so much about this person whose show I've never watched? I often feel that way. Like, why do I know this?
Yeah. Like we're on a first name basis or something.
I know. Right. I think I think it's, like you said, I think it's really about the journey of it. And it's about the intentionality of it, of that. If that's what you strive for, you're going to end up getting closer to that goal. And it doesn't mean that goal is like you reach it or you don't. Like if you're going to get closer to that goal. Do you still keep your time diaries?
Oh yeah. I'm 3 years and 3 months in.
Yay.
I know how I've spent every half hour for the past 3 years and 3 months.
Crazy. I love it. Well, so you talked about a few of the tactical strategies. I want to touch on that before we wrap up, but you did talk about this idea of doing Friday afternoon planning sessions. And can you remind everyone again, what were the 3 buckets you advise folks use as part of those planning sessions for the following week?
Yeah, career, relationships, self. So career is pretty self-explanatory. What are your top priorities for the career? Relationships could be friends and family. Could be work relationships too, honestly. I mean, those are real relationships as well. And then self is, particular things that are, I tend not to include my normal like running goals, for instance, in that, because I run every day. But I don't include that. That's just sort of daily habits. The priorities for the week are like different things, like things that are not happening every week that I want to put in. So, for instance, for the next week, I just did this because it's Friday afternoon. My relationship goals, I'm doing these, what I call mommy days with each of my 4 kids. We get 1 day in the summer that we go do a day trip together. So I have one coming up this week. And I'm also meeting a friend who's also a professional acquaintance, but I'm interviewing her for my podcast. She's going to be here in Philadelphia, so I'm going to meet her in person. So that's great. On the personal front, I'm getting my hair cut because I haven't gotten it cut in like 4 months. It's getting ridiculous. And then I also put down that I want to do a bike ride at some point during the week. So those are the kind of things like, and that's on my list. So now they're going to happen. Like they will happen.
Priorities. We should be clear. These are priorities. This is not your like, do the laundry.
No, don't put that on the list.
Like, because I think people get caught up in that about how can I bucket only these 3 categories when all these other things need to get done? It's like all the other things that need to get
they will get done. Like, and you can make a different list for that. Like,
exactly.
If you need to remember that, make a different list. But this is really about, and for the professional stuff too, I try not to have it just be the whole laundry list of stuff that needs to get occur. Like I'm also trying to think, well, what is truly the top priority? And ideally it's not stuff that has to happen. It's stuff that I would like to have happen.
And I always look at that too as like, what are the things where at the end of the week, if you accomplish them, you'll feel like that was a really good week. Whereas like doing my laundry, getting that done is not going to make me necessarily look back and say that was a really good week.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Right. It doesn't work that way. So just to wrap up, I loved that you, actually one of the other tactical strategies you had was this idea of batching your tasks and meetings. at certain times of the day. Can you talk about that quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, it's just that, the time around a meeting, it's hard to use well. Like, you stop doing anything deeper by like 15 minutes before as you're getting ready for it. And then afterwards, people like cycle through these little like transition rituals they do. Like, they check all their favorite web pages and stuff before they get back to deeper work. And so if you have like a meeting every other hour, like, you're never doing anything, because it's just like checking email in between meetings and they get back. So you might be better off, instead of having like one meeting at 10, one at 12, one at 2, like see if you can do 1, 2, and 3 or something, and then have 8 to 1 be open for like the deeper projects that you need to do. That's, you have to think about this, and you have to triage your schedule, because you're gonna, people will just ask you for 10, and if you want 10 to not happen, you need to tell people like, oh, that's not going to work, and let's do a different time. But often when people aren't really being strategic about their schedule, they don't think about that.
Right. No, that's a great one. So overall, thanks for talking to us today. I mean, I think the takeaway here is striving for more nourishment and making sure that, as you said in the book, the way that we're spending our hours are how we want to be spending our hours for the most part. Nobody wants to be doing laundry and doing that stuff, but the things that matter, and striving for more nourishment rather than activity is kind of what I took away from, as you're
sorry, I know. I'm sorry that the screaming just happened.
That's okay.
Okay.
But one of the things when you closed the book, you were talking about being on the trail and running, and you wrote this beautiful passage, which I just want to share as we close, which was, somewhere amid my mental patter, I emerged from the woods to a clearing where the river flowed right there beside me. My mind jarred to a stop. I breathed in the wildflowers and all this slow water's magnificence. For a moment, I could think of nothing except the wind on my face, the sun on my arms, the birds cawing overhead. Beautiful, beautiful, I felt the words swimming around my brain. That is the image I will remember when I think about that bike ride, not the mental chatter. That sudden sense of freedom can crowd out all else, at least for a bit. All time passes, but some moments transcend the ceaseless ticking. We simply need to see them, and then in time we see more. And I'm like choking up reading. It's just beautiful. It's this idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy of the more that you work on this, the more that you try to make memories, the more that you declutter your schedule down to the things that matter and plan ahead, the more you're going to see those opportunities and make those memories. So any closing thought on that?
Yeah, no, you try to notice these things, these transcendent moments. And as you have the story in your life that there are these transcendent moments, these moments you really want to linger in and savor, then you will start to see more of them. And that helps create more memories. And as we talked about earlier, more memories helps create more time. And given that, all our time on this planet is limited, anything we can do to make it feel like we have more time, more good time, more minutes that we're excited about is a good thing.
Okay, so how can folks stay in touch with you? And I will have links to the book as well. It's called Off the Clock, Feel Less Busy While Getting More Done. So how can folks stay in touch with you and find out more about you?
Yeah, they can come visit my website, which is lauravanderkam.com, just my name. Check out Off the Clock. If you listen to podcasts, I have one called Best of Both Worlds, where we talk about combining work and family from the perspective of people who love both. And there's several other productivity books too. If you're into productivity books, Productivity Book Junkie, you can check out those 168 Hours, What the Most Successful People Do Before Breakfast, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And you also have a PDF download on your site for if you want to start tracking your time. Is that correct?
Yeah. You can come to my website and get that. Just fill out the subscription form and I'll email it to you, and you can start tracking your time.
Great. Well, thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.